The silence in the obsidian room lasted exactly 3 seconds after Vera Locke hit the floor. Not Vera, that was the name on the laminated badge clipped to her black server's vest, the one she'd been wearing for exactly 11 days. Her real name didn't matter here. What mattered was that Roman Carver, the man who controlled half of Vancouver's waterfront and ate politicians for breakfast, was lying on the polished concrete with his cheek pressed against the cold floor and his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that made the nearest bodyguard go pale. She hadn't planned it. That was the part that kept replaying in her head afterward, in the quiet of the alley where she stood with her knuckles throbbing and her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She had not planned it. 11 days of careful, invisible work, blown in under 4 seconds because the man thought he could grab her wrist and not let go. "I asked you nicely," she said, her voice very quiet. She was still holding his arm at that angle. "Twice." Roman Carver looked up at her from the floor with those winter-grey eyes, and for the first time in what was probably a very long time, he looked genuinely surprised. That was the moment everything changed. She just didn't know it yet. Zara Novak had arrived in Vancouver with $40 in her wallet, a burner phone, and the kind of exhaustion that settles into the bones and doesn't leave. She was 28 years old, and she moved like someone who had learned a long time ago to take up as little space as possible. Not out of meekness, out of necessity. The less you looked like someone worth noticing, the longer you stayed safe. She needed the job at the Obsidian Room because the Obsidian Room was the kind of place that paid cash, asked no questions about your employment history, and had exactly one man walking through its VIP section every Thursday night who Zara needed to get close to. Not Roman Carver. Not yet. His presence in the story was something she hadn't fully calculated. The man she was watching was Frederick Holst, 53, soft around the middle, third-generation money, with a taste for private art sales, and an offshore accounting firm that had recently acquired 3 shell companies previously linked to the death of Zara's younger brother, Danny. Danny, who had been 22 and working as a courier without knowing what he was actually delivering. Danny, who had come home one night with shaking hands and told her he'd seen something he shouldn't have. Danny, who had been found in the water under the Burrard Bridge 6 weeks later with what the police ruled a tragic accident. Zara did not believe in tragic accidents. Not that one. She'd spent 4 months building her case. She had names, account numbers, a chain of transactions she couldn't yet fully decode, and a photograph of Frederick Holst shaking hands with a man whose face appeared in exactly 0 public records. She needed one thing more. A particular hard drive that Holst carried in a brushed aluminium case whenever he attended private meetings, which he did every 3rd Thursday at the Obsidian Room. She'd worked the early shift her first week, learned the layout, the staff rhythms, the rotation of Carver's security detail, because Carver owned the building and his people were everywhere. By her 2nd week, she had positioned herself to cover the late VIP rotation. Holst was expected at 10. She hadn't counted on Roman Carver arriving at 9:15 in a mood that radiated the specific energy of a man who had already made several decisions that evening he wasn't particularly happy about. He was 40 years old, dark-haired, with the kind of broad-shouldered build that came from actual physical work rather than a personal trainer, which struck her as incongruous given that the man reportedly owned 4 companies and a marina. He sat in the center booth with 2 men on either side of him and didn't look at anyone. He ordered scotch. He didn't say please. He didn't tip. Zara kept her head down. She moved efficiently. She was good at this, the invisibility, the peripheral awareness, the keeping her face blank while her mind catalogued everything. "You! Come here!" She turned. Carver was looking at her now, and she registered 2 things simultaneously. That his attention was the kind that made the air in a room feel thinner, and that his security, all 4 of them, had straightened in the exact way that meant they were waiting for a signal. "More scotch," he said. Not a question. She nodded. She went and got it. She set it down without a word. "What's your name?" "Vera," she said. He looked at her for a moment, not the way men usually looked at women who served them drinks. It was more analytical than that and more unsettling for it. "Your new 11 days. You haven't spilled anything. I try not to." The corner of his mouth moved. It wasn't quite a smile. "Most people shake a little. First time working this section." "I don't shake," Zara said, which was not entirely true. She had learned, over years of doing things that were frightening, to redirect the adrenaline somewhere useful. But her hands were steady. They always were when it counted. He studied her the way you studied something that didn't fit the pattern. "Where did you come from?" "Calgary," she said. This was true. It was also the last piece of her real history she intended to share. "Calgary," he repeated, in a tone that suggested Calgary was an amusing concept. Then he reached out and, without any particular warning, caught her wrist. His grip was not rough. It was simply absolute, the kind that didn't occur to you to test. You walk like someone who's been trained, Roman Carver said quietly. You check the exits. You count the bodies in the room. You clocked my security rotation inside of 5 minutes. I watched you do it. His eyes were very steady. Who are you working for? Zara felt the old machinery engage, the part of her brain that had once been trained by a person she tried not to think about. The part that broke situations into components, distance, leverage, the angle of his elbow, the position of the nearest guard. I'm a server, she said. Let go of my wrist. I don't think you are. Let go, she repeated. And when he didn't, when that grey gaze stayed absolutely fixed on her with the confidence of a man who had never been told no and intended to keep it that way, something in Zara's chest went very cold and very clear. She thought about Danny, about the phone call, about the bridge. Last time, she said. Roman Carver's eyes narrowed, and she could see that he thought he was calling a bluff. He tightened his grip, just slightly, leaning in. I want to know who. She moved. It was fast enough that the nearest bodyguard, a large man with a neck like a load-bearing wall, didn't even register what happened until it was over. She stepped into Carver's space, not away from him, used her free hand to break the angle at his wrist, pivoted from the hip, and used the geometry of the moment to put 220 pounds of organized crime boss on the floor with a sound like a bag of equipment hitting a loading dock. She kept the wrist. She placed her forearm across his shoulder, just enough pressure to communicate that escalating this would be unwise. The room made a sound like all its air had been replaced. I asked you nicely, she said. There was a pause. Zara was aware of the guards having drawn weapons. She was aware this situation was approximately 60 seconds from becoming very bad. She was also aware that Roman Carver, flat on the floor, was looking up at her with an expression she hadn't expected. He wasn't angry, he was paying attention. Stand down, he said. His voice was even. Like being put on the floor was a thing that happened in his normal week and he'd decided to roll with it. Boss, I said stand down, Holt. His eyes didn't leave Zara's face. Let her up. She released him and stepped back. He rose without rushing, straightened his jacket, and looked at her with that same dissecting calm. There was a mark on his palm where the floor had caught him. His expression said nothing about it. You didn't run, he observed. Running would have made it worse. True. He studied her. Up close, she could see a faint scar along his jawline, old and thin, the kind that came from something he'd survived before it could kill him. Who taught you that? Fitness class, Zara said flatly. His mouth moved again, that not quite smile. Then he said, Get out of this building. Don't come back. She was nearly at the velvet rope when his voice followed her, quiet enough that only she would catch it. Vera, I will find out who you are. Consider that a courtesy. She didn't turn around, she kept walking, but her chest was tight, and not just because she'd just destroyed 11 days of positioning in under a minute. Frederick Holst had arrived at the side entrance while all eyes were on the booth. She hadn't even seen him leave. She was 3 blocks from the club, walking fast with her hands in her pockets, when she heard the car. It rolled up slow and quiet, which was always worse than fast. The window came down. It was the guard from the one Carver had called Holt, a wide, flat face, unhappy. Mr. Carver would like to speak with you. Mr. Carver, Zara said. Just told me to leave his building. He changed his mind. The car is warm. Zara looked at the car. She looked at the street, the rain coming down now in the particular dispirited way it rained in Vancouver in November. She thought about the drive, about Holst, about the fact that she now had no access to the club and no alternative plan and fewer resources than she could afford. She got in the car. Roman Carver was in the back seat. He'd changed his jacket. He must have gone out a different way and beaten her to the car, which was either efficient or deeply strange. He handed her a coffee without asking if she wanted one. It was black. She drank it. I'm not going to apologize for the floor, she said. I'm not asking you to. He looked out the window as the city moved past. You were watching Holst. She said nothing. Frederick Holst. He came in the side entrance at 10:10. You clocked it through the mirror behind the bar. Carver glanced at her. I was watching you watch him. Zara held the coffee cup in both hands and said nothing. My building, Carver continued in the same level tone, was used 3 months ago to facilitate a meeting I didn't authorize. A meeting that cost me 2 contracts, a shipping route, and a man I trusted. Holst was in this building the night that happened. He paused. I've been looking for a reason to move on him that doesn't require me to make assumptions. Assumptions in my line of work are expensive. Zara looked at him sideways. The rain was loud against the roof. What exactly do you do? She asked. Logistics, he said. What kind? The complicated kind. He met her eyes, and there was something in his expression that was almost wry. You already know who I am. Don't perform ignorance. It doesn't suit you. She exhaled. You move goods through the port. You have agreements with 3 unions and at least 2 city councillors. You've been under investigation twice and nothing stuck because the investigators ran out of patience before you ran out of lawyers." She paused. "And someone has been undermining your operations for 8 months and you think it connects to Holst." A beat of silence. "Calgary fitness classes must be exceptional," he said. Despite herself, something in Zara's chest shifted. A fraction. She didn't let it show. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you didn't run. Because you put me on the floor cleanly, which means you've been trained by someone serious, and you're not working for my usual competition, or you would have used that training differently tonight." He looked at her steadily. "And because I want to know what you know about Holst." "I don't know anything about Holst," Zara said. "That's the second lie you've told me tonight." She was quiet for a moment. The car was moving through the rain, heading somewhere she hadn't been told about, which she noted with the part of her brain that tracked such things. She thought up her options. Alone, she had nothing. She'd burned her access, her cover identity, and her position, all for the sake of not letting a man hold her wrist. She didn't regret that part, but she needed a different door into Holst's world. And Roman Carver, whether she liked the shape of this or not, had an entire building full of them. "I need something from him," she said. "He has a drive, information on it that doesn't belong to him." She kept her eyes forward. "It's personal." "My brother," Zara said quietly. Just those 2 words. The car was quiet for a long time after that. "Where does he keep it?" Carver said finally. "He carries it. Brushed aluminium case about the size of a paperback. He never checks it at coat check. He's there every 3rd Thursday, yes." Carver looked out at the rain. His profile in the city light was all hard angles and old decisions. "What do you need from me?" "Access," she said. "One more night. And someone on the inside who knows the back layout of that room." He looked at her. "And in return, whatever I find on that drive about your operations, I'll share it. I only want one thing. The rest is yours." She finally looked at him directly. "And I'll figure out where your leak is, because I've been in that building for 11 days and I already have a guess." Something shifted in his expression. It wasn't warmth. Exactly. It was closer to the look of a person who had been working a very hard problem for a long time and had just been handed an unexpected variable. "There's a contact of mine in the building," he said. "Her name is Brixton. She runs inventory. She'll get you in the service entrance Thursday. I need my badge replaced." He paused. "What name?" Zara thought about it. "Vera's fine," he nodded. The car pulled to the curb. "Get some sleep," he said. "You look like someone who's been carrying something heavy for too long." She opened the door. The rain came in cold and immediate. She looked back at him once, this man who was either the most useful complication she'd ever encountered or the most dangerous one, and decided the distinction might not matter as much she'd thought. She said, "Don't follow me tonight." "I'm not," he said. She believed him. She wasn't sure why. The next 4 days were the kind of waiting that wore grooves in you. She stayed in the room she was renting above a Portuguese bakery in East Van, the kind of place where no one looked twice because everyone was minding their own business aggressively. She went through everything she had on Holst again, the photographs, the transaction records she'd spent 3 months quietly compiling from sources she wasn't going to think too hard about. The transcript of the last phone call Danny had made, the one to a number she had never been able to fully trace, 9 hours before he died. She missed him in a way that had moved past the shape of grief and into something more structural, like a beam that was gone and the whole building was compensating. You didn't cry about it. You just felt the lean all the time, everywhere. She also went through what she knew about Roman Carver, which was considerably more than she'd admitted to him in the car. He had grown up in Burnaby. His father had worked at the port, and his father had worked with certain people, and those people's operations had. Over time and through a process of inheritance and consolidation that would take an economist to fully diagram, become Romans. He wasn't what people thought when they thought about organized crime. There was no flash to him, no performance. He was methodical and patient, and he had reportedly once waited 11 months to settle a disagreement because the timing needed to be right. What she hadn't expected was the thing in the car, the way he'd listened, the way he hadn't pushed when she'd said the word brother. Most people pushed. They wanted to understand the leverage so they could use it. He'd just gone quiet and then asked what she needed. She kept thinking about that. Wednesday evening, a message arrived through a channel she hadn't given him, which meant he had more resources than she'd credited. It said, "Brixton at the North Door, 9 p.m. Holst confirmed for tomorrow." She stared at the message for a while, then she typed back, "How did you get this number?" The reply came quickly, "Calgary fitness classes." She almost smiled. Almost. The second time she walked into the obsidian room, she felt the difference immediately. She was expected. The woman at the North Door was compact and efficient and asked no questions whatsoever, which Zara appreciated. The badge was good, better than her original one, actually. Zara had an hour before Holst was due to arrive. She used it. The private meeting rooms on the upper level were accessible through the kitchen corridor, a fact she'd noted on day 3 and filed away. The room Holst used was the second on the left. She got in, established what she needed to establish, and was back on the floor by 9:50. Frederick Holst arrived at 10:05. He was exactly as unremarkable as she remembered. That was the thing about men like Holst, they cultivated that. Average height, average build, expensive haircut that managed to look inexpensive. He smiled back, and no one looked close enough to notice that his eyes never changed when he did. Zara brought him his drink. He didn't look at her. Perfect. The meeting he'd come for started at 10:30 in the private room. Zara watched the door from the bar. At 11:15, everything shifted. She was pouring a glass of water when she felt the air change in the room. A particular quality of tension that she'd learned to read the way other people read weather. She scanned. 3 men had come in through the main entrance, and they were not the regular clientele. They moved wrong, too deliberate. They positioned themselves with sight lines to the private corridor. They weren't Carver's people. She knew his people now. Her earpiece, the one she was running off a modified police scanner app, crackled, not with the scanner feed, with something else. A voice she didn't recognize. Package is confirmed inside. Move on the egress in 10. They were here for Holst, specifically for what Holst was carrying, which meant someone else knew about the drive. Zara's mind ran the calculation fast. If Holst was grabbed before she could access the drive, it was gone. If there was a confrontation in this building, it would go loud. Carver's security would respond, and the night would become something she couldn't control. She needed to move now. She was already moving. She slipped into the service corridor, through the door she'd scouted, and came up through the back of the private meeting room. Holst was at the table with 2 other men she didn't recognize. The aluminium case was on the seat beside him. "I need you to come with me," she said. 3 heads turned. Holst looked confused and then alarmed. "Who are you?" "There are people here to take that case," she said, nodding at it. "They'll be at the main door in less than 8 minutes. I know another way out. You want to come or not?" Holst stared at her. "Who sent you?" "Nobody," she said. "I need what's on that drive. You can give it to me now, or you can explain to whoever's at that door why you don't have it anymore. Pick." The 2 men at the table started to rise. Zara held up a hand. "Sit down," she said, in the voice she almost never used, the one that came from the years before Vancouver and before Danny, and before she'd decided to be careful. It was not loud, it was simply absolute. They sat. She looked at Holst. He was calculating. She could see it, running angles. She gave him 4 seconds. Then the sound of raised voices came from beyond the door, and Holst grabbed the case and stood up. They went out the service stairs. She knew every turn. At the bottom, she pushed through the fire door and into the alley, the cold November air hitting them hard. And there was Roman Carver. He was leaning against the wall of the alley like he'd been there all evening, hands in his pockets, his security arranged at either end. He looked at Holst with an expression that contained a great deal of patience that was coming to an end. "Frederick," he said, "we should talk." Holst took a step back. Zara blocked it, not aggressively, just a presence that made the direction clear. "He was found your leak," Zara said to Carver quietly. He looked at her. "Him?" "Not directly. He's been running information to a third party. One of your port contacts. Someone inside your operations." She paused. "The name is on the drive." Carver looked at Holst for a long moment. There was something very still about him when he was angry. It was more unsettling than noise. "The drive," Carver said to Holst. "Give it to her." Holst clutched the case. "You don't know what's on there. It's not just your operation. There are people who will." "I know what's on it," Zara said. She kept her voice flat and very clear. "I know about the shell companies. I know about the courier contract and the Barad accounts and what happened in November last year to a 22-year-old who saw something he wasn't supposed to see." She looked at Holst directly. "His name was Daniel Novak. He was my brother. And he is why I have spent 4 months taking apart your business transaction by transaction, and why I will be on the phone to the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit within 24 hours with everything I have. Unless," she paused, "I have that drive in the next 60 seconds. The alley was very quiet. Holst looked between her and Carver. He saw no exits in either direction. He looked down at the case in his hands and then he set it on the ground, picked it up. She unlatched it, confirmed the drive was there, ran the verify code on her phone. Green text scrolled. She stood up. "The name you want is in the operational files, under a contact listed as Meridian." She watched his jaw tighten. "I'm sorry. I know it's someone close." Then he said, "Is it enough, the drive? Is it enough to clear him?" "Not clear her. Clear him, Danny." Her throat tightened. She kept her face steady. "It will be." He nodded once. Then he looked at his security. "Take Holst somewhere quiet and don't let him make any calls. I'll be there in an hour." Holst was removed from the alley without ceremony. Zara stood there with the case against her chest. "You knew," she said. "That they'd be here tonight. I suspected," Carver said. "The people who've been working against my operation wouldn't let Holst leave with that drive. If they thought he was about to be compromised, they'd move to recover it." He looked at her. "I was waiting to see which way it went. You let me walk in there anyway. You would have gone in whether I let you or not." She didn't answer. "Because he was right, Meridian," Carver said quietly. The name sat in the air between them. "That's Alderman, his security chief. A man who had, as far as she could tell from the records, been with Carver's operation for 12 years. "I'm sorry," she said again, because she was. He was quiet for a long time. The rain had stopped, and the alley smelled of wet concrete and the exhaust from the street beyond. He looked like someone absorbing the particular weight of being betrayed by someone trusted, that very specific kind of heavy. "How long did you know?" he asked. "Since Thursday last week. I wasn't sure how to tell you. You could have told me in the car. I had one piece of it. I needed the rest." She looked at him. "I'm not sorry I waited. I needed the drive first." His mouth moved, almost not an expression. But she was starting to learn his face. "No," he said, "I wouldn't expect you to be." She exhaled. The night felt like something that had finally put itself down after a very long time of being held. "I'll be in contact with the RCMP tomorrow," she said. "What happens with your operation after that is your business. But anything on this drive that connects to Danny, I'm taking." "That's fair." He looked at her. "What will you do after?" Which she hadn't done in months. "I don't know. I've been pointed at this for so long I haven't thought past it." "That's a common problem," he said, "when you've been running towards something." She looked up at him. The city was quiet out beyond the alley, and the streetlights were doing their best against the November dark. Roman Carver looked like a man who was used to the weight of things, who had organized his entire life around carrying it efficiently, and who was standing in an alley at midnight with his jacket damp and his operation compromised and something in his eyes that she couldn't quite name. "I could use someone," he said carefully, "who knows how to read a room and a situation, and apparently a port operations file." He paused. "That's not an offer right now. That's me saying the door is there if you decide you want it." Zara looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at the case in her hands. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I'm asking." She nodded. She turned to go, and then she stopped, because there was something that had been in her chest for 4 months and was now loosening in a way she hadn't prepared for, and she needed a second. "He was a good kid," she said, her voice even. "My brother, he wasn't involved in anything, he was just in the wrong place." "I know," Carver said, quietly without performance. She walked out of the alley. She didn't look back, but she heard him say, very low behind her, "I'll make sure the right people hear about it." 14 months later, the RCMP press release described the conviction of 4 individuals connected to a money laundering and fraud operation that had used a series of shell companies to conceal transactions linked to the deaths of 2 young Canadians. It was a short paragraph near the bottom of a longer document. The names of the victims were included. Daniel Novak, 22 years old, Vancouver. Zara read the release on her phone, sitting on the steps outside a building on Burrard Street, the kind of Tuesday afternoon where the clouds couldn't decide if they wanted to come all the way in. She read it twice. Then she sat with it for a while. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number she knew now very well. Saw the release. "How are you?" She thought about that, about how she was. It was not a simple question, and he knew it wasn't a simple question, which was why he was the right person to ask it. She typed back, "Better than I thought I'd be. Worse than I expected to feel." A pause. Then, "That's honest. I'm working on it," she typed. Another pause, longer. Then, "The door is still there if you want it." She looked up at the street, at the city that had been her hiding place and had become, somewhere along the way, something else. At the port in the distance, the cranes moving in their slow, patient way against the grey sky. She thought about Roman Carver, about the alley, about a man who had listened when she said the word brother and hadn't pushed, about 12 months of a different kind of working relationship, built carefully and honestly, one phone call and one late-night conversation at a time, about the particular feeling of putting something down after a very long time of carrying it. She typed, "I know. I'll be there Monday." She put the phone in her pocket and looked up at the clouds for a moment, just breathing. Danny would have laughed at all of it, she thought, the whole improbable mess of it. He had always thought her too serious, too careful, too reluctant to let anything good catch her off guard. She stood up, picked up her bag, and walked toward the water. She wasn't running anymore. That was the difference. She was walking toward something, and she knew where it was, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, that felt like enough.